Jamal Washington stands frozen in the first-class cabin doorway of Flight 1342 to San Francisco as flight attendant Heather Brooks blocks his path, loudly questioning his ticket's authenticity. Surrounding passengers snicker and stare. A mysterious woman in dark sunglasses rises from her seat, tablet in hand. The plane's engines suddenly power down. Before we dive into this incredible story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. If you enjoy stories about justice being served in unexpected ways, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Now, let's see what happens when people make the dangerous mistake of judging someone by their appearance. The morning sun streamed through threadbare curtains as Jamal Washington's alarm blared at precisely 5:30 a.m. He silenced it with a practiced motion, careful not to wake his grandmother Doris in the adjacent bedroom of their modest two-bedroom apartment on Chicago's South Side. Today wasn't just any day. It marked a pivotal moment in his 17 years of life, the beginning of his journey to Stanford University's prestigious summer technology program. Jamal slipped out of bed, his feet finding the cool hardwood floor. The walls of his small bedroom were covered with academic certificates, science fair ribbons, and a carefully preserved acceptance letter from Stanford. Unlike the rooms of most teenagers, there were no posters of celebrities or athletes, just a single framed photo of a younger Jamal with his mother, Zara, taken 10 years ago. As he prepared for his morning shower, Jamal's mind drifted to memories of his childhood. His mother Zara had left Chicago when he was just 7 years old, pursuing an MBA at Harvard Business School. What was supposed to be a temporary separation extended indefinitely as her career took off in Silicon Valley and then internationally. Phone calls, video chats, and occasional gifts marked their relationship over the past decade, with Zara always promising that her sacrifices would eventually create opportunities for Jamal. Meanwhile, Doris had become his rock, raising him with unwavering love and strict discipline. A retired high school mathematics teacher, she had nurtured Jamal's exceptional aptitude for computer science and engineering. Under her guidance, he had maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA, developed 3 mobile apps, and earned a full scholarship to Stanford's exclusive summer program for gifted high school students. After his shower, Jamal found Doris in the kitchen preparing his favorite breakfast. Blueberry pancakes with turkey bacon. "Good morning, Grandma," Jamal said, kissing her cheek. "Morning, baby. You sleep okay?" Doris asked, sliding a plate in front of him. "Not really. Too excited, I guess," Jamal admitted, cutting into his pancakes. "Understandable. It's a big day," Doris said, her voice containing a hint of something Jamal couldn't quite identify. She seemed to be holding back a smile. "What?" Jamal asked, recognizing her expression. Doris sat across from him, her eyes twinkling. "I wasn't supposed to tell you, but I can't keep it in any longer. Your mother called last night while you were asleep." Jamal froze mid-bite. "Mom called? Why didn't you wake me?" "She asked me not to. She wanted to surprise you." Doris reached across the table and squeezed Jamal's hand. "She's flying in from Tokyo today, specifically to see you off." The fork clattered against Jamal's plate. "She's coming here. Today. She said she'll meet you at the airport. And that's not all." Doris pulled an envelope from her robe pocket and slid it across the table. "This came by courier yesterday." Jamal opened the envelope with trembling fingers, revealing a first-class ticket to San Francisco. His economy ticket, purchased with his savings, was still in his backpack. "Mom sent this?" he asked, stunned. "She said it was time you traveled like the young man you've become." Doris's eyes moistened. "She's proud of you, Jamal. We both are." Jamal stared at the ticket, conflicting emotions surging through him. Excitement at flying first class mingled with resentment over his mother's long absence and anxiety about their reunion. The expensive ticket represented everything about their relationship, his mother attempting to compensate with material things for her physical absence in his life. "I don't know if I want to see her," Jamal admitted quietly. Doris's expression softened with understanding. "I know it's been hard, baby. But your mother loves you in her own way. Maybe it's time to hear her out." Jamal nodded reluctantly, tucking the ticket into his pocket. As he finished breakfast, his phone buzzed with a text from his best friend Keith, confirming he was on his way to drive Jamal to O'Hare. 30 minutes later, Jamal stood in the living room with his luggage, taking a final look around the apartment that had been his whole world. His Stanford acceptance package outlined the cultural and racial diversity initiatives they proudly touted, but Keith, who had attended a similar program the previous year, had warned Jamal about the reality. The doorbell rang, and Doris opened it to reveal Keith, dressed in his characteristic jeans and Chicago Bulls jersey. "Ready for the big adventure, genius?" Keith asked, grabbing one of Jamal's bags. "As ready as I'll ever be," Jamal replied, giving his grandmother a tight hug. "Remember who you are," Doris whispered in his ear. "No matter how they look at you or what they say, you belong in those spaces. Your brain earned you that spot." Jamal nodded, fighting back unexpected tears. "I love you, Grandma. Love you too, baby. Now go change the world." In Keith's battered Honda Civic, the two friends navigated Chicago's morning traffic toward O'Hare International Airport. "So," Keith said, glancing sideways at Jamal, "your mom's really coming to see you off?" "Apparently," Jamal replied, staring out the window. "First time in 3 years. And she upgraded you to first class?" "That's dope," Keith said, clearly trying to focus on the positive. "Yeah, dope," Jamal echoed without enthusiasm. Keith sighed, recognizing his friend's mood. "Look, I know it's complicated with your mom. But flying first class? That's going to be sweet." "I guess," Jamal conceded. "I've never even been on a plane before." "Well, you're starting at the top then," Keith grinned, then turned serious. "Just remember what I told you about Stanford. It's not like our high school." Jamal nodded. Their high school was predominantly black and Hispanic, with teachers who looked like them and understood their experiences. Stanford would be different. Those tech programs are still mostly white and Asian kids from wealthy families, Keith continued. They'll make assumptions about you based on how you look, talk, dress, everything except your actual abilities. "I know," Jamal said quietly. "Grandma gave me the same speech. Just be prepared to work twice as hard to get the same recognition," Keith advised as they approached the airport. "And don't let anybody make you feel like you don't belong there." As they pulled up to the departures terminal, Keith gave Jamal a brotherly hug. "You got this, man. You're literally the smartest person I know." Jamal smiled genuinely for the first time that morning. "Thanks for everything, Keith. Just remember us little people when you're running Silicon Valley," Keith called out as Jamal grabbed his luggage. Jamal waved goodbye, turned toward the terminal entrance, and took a deep breath. He was about to board his first ever flight, meet his long-absent mother, and begin a summer that would shape his future. With shoulders squared, he stepped through the automatic doors, entering a world far removed from his familiar South Side neighborhood. The gleaming expanse of O'Hare International Airport's Terminal 1 swallowed Jamal in a cacophony of announcements, rolling luggage, and hurried conversations. Business travelers in tailored suits and families in vacation attire streamed past him as he consulted the departures board, searching for his gate information. Finding his flight, Jamal followed the signs toward security, his first-class ticket clutched tightly in his hand. As he approached the TSA checkpoint, he observed the two distinct lines, the standard security line stretching back several switchbacks, and the significantly shorter TSA pre-check line where business travelers breezed through with practiced efficiency. Jamal joined the regular security line, observing the diverse mix of travelers. A family in front of him chatted excitedly in Spanish about their upcoming vacation. Behind him, a group of white college students compared notes about their European backpacking plans. When Jamal finally reached the ID check podium, the TSA officer scrutinized his driver's license with unexpected intensity, looking back and forth between the photo and Jamal's face multiple times. "Purpose of your trip today?" the officer asked, a question Jamal noticed hadn't been posed to the travelers ahead of him. "I'm attending a summer program at Stanford University," Jamal replied evenly, remembering his grandmother's advice to always remain polite but firm in these situations. The officer handed back his ID and boarding pass with a curt nod. Jamal proceeded to the conveyor belt, removing his shoes, belt, and the laptop from his backpack as instructed. As he was about to walk through the metal detector, another TSA agent stepped forward. "Sir, you've been randomly selected for additional screening," the agent announced, gesturing Jamal toward a separate area. Jamal noticed the white businessman who had been behind him in line now passing through the metal detector without issue. The random selection wasn't lost on him, it was a familiar pattern he and Keith had discussed countless times. Still, he complied silently, extending his arms as instructed for the pat-down procedure. "Is this really necessary?" Jamal finally asked as the agent swabbed his palms for explosive residue. "It's random, sir," the agent replied mechanically. "Just procedure." By the time Jamal was cleared and had recollected his belongings, 15 minutes had passed. He checked his phone, still no message from his mother. The anticipation of seeing her after so many years made his stomach clench with anxiety. Following the signs to his gate, Jamal observed the clear socio-economic stratification of the airport. Designer stores lined the corridors, with travelers who looked nothing like those from his neighborhood casually browsing $500 sunglasses and $1,000 handbags. He passed a gourmet restaurant where a simple breakfast cost more than what his grandmother would spend on groceries for several days. At gate B17, Jamal found a seat near the boarding area and checked his phone again. It was 10:15 a.m., with boarding scheduled to begin at 10:30. Still no word from his mother. He sent a brief text, "At the gate now. Are you here yet?" While waiting for a response, Jamal observed the flight crew assembling near the gate desk. Two flight attendants in particular caught his attention. A blonde woman around 30 and a tall man with perfectly coiffed hair, both with name tags identifying them as Heather Brooks and Brad Cooper. They greeted arriving first-class passengers with warm smiles and familiar banter, clearly recognizing some as frequent flyers. "Good morning, Mr. Patterson." "Lovely to see you again," Heather chirped to an older white gentleman. "Your usual seat in 2A is all ready for you. Mr. and Mrs. Davis, welcome back." Brad called to a well-dressed couple. "How was Paris?" Jamal watched this performance with fascination, wondering if they would greet him with the same warmth. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother, "Running late. Bored without me. Will explain everything." Disappointment washed over him. He should have known better than to expect her to actually show up. For 10 years, Zara Washington had been an abstraction in his life, a voice on the phone, a face on a screen, a signature on birthday cards. Why would today be any different? As boarding time approached, Jamal noticed a commotion at the gate desk. A middle-aged white man in an expensive suit was gesturing animatedly at the gate agent, his voice carrying across the waiting area. "This is completely unacceptable. Do you have any idea who I am? I've been a Diamond member for 15 years. The gate agent maintained a professional demeanor. "I understand, Mr. Bennett, but as I explained, the first-class cabin is completely full today. We simply cannot upgrade your son." Jamal recognized the name immediately. Russell Bennett was the CEO of Bennett Technologies, a company frequently in the news for its government contracts and controversial labor practices. Beside him stood a younger version of himself, presumably his son, wearing designer clothes and an expression of entitled indignation. "This is ridiculous," the son muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "I'm not sitting in economy with those people." The father continued arguing with the gate agent while the son, who appeared to be around Jamal's age, scanned the gate area with obvious disdain. His gaze landed on Jamal, taking in his simple jeans, Stanford t-shirt, and scuffed sneakers. A smirk formed on the younger Bennett's face as he leaned toward his father and whispered something that made them both glance in Jamal's direction. The boarding announcement finally came, with first-class passengers invited to board first. Jamal remained seated, hoping against hope that his mother might still appear. The Bennetts joined the first-class boarding line, with the son, whose name Jamal overheard was Trevor, continuing to cast disdainful glances his way. As the economy passengers began lining up, Jamal reluctantly joined the dwindling first-class line, his heart heavy with his mother's absence. When he presented his boarding pass to Heather, her smile noticeably dimmed. "First class?" she asked, examining his ticket with furrowed brows. "Yes," Jamal replied simply. "I see." Her tone contained a note of suspicion, but she scanned his boarding pass and handed it back. "Enjoy your flight." As Jamal walked down the jetway, he could feel Trevor Bennett's eyes boring into his back. He had faced prejudice before, but something told him this flight would test his grandmother's advice about remaining dignified in the face of discrimination in ways he hadn't experienced before. With each step toward the aircraft, Jamal's excitement about his first flight and the Stanford program competed with his disappointment over his mother's absence and anxiety about the clear hostility from passengers like the Bennetts. Taking a deep breath, he reached the aircraft door, where Brad Cooper waited to greet first-class passengers. "Welcome aboard," Brad said flatly, his welcoming smile evaporating as he took in Jamal's appearance. It was going to be a long flight to San Francisco. Jamal stepped into the gleaming interior of the Boeing 787, immediately struck by the stark contrast between the spacious first-class cabin and the cramped economy section visible beyond. The first-class area featured wide leather seats arranged in a 1-2-1 configuration, each with its own aisle access. Ambient lighting created a soothing atmosphere, while the subtle scent of lavender permeated the air. As Jamal paused momentarily to absorb his surroundings, flight attendant Heather Brooks suddenly materialized before him, effectively blocking his path. "Excuse me," she said, her voice unnecessarily loud. "This is the first-class cabin. Economy boarding is after we complete first-class boarding." Jamal felt heat rise to his face as several passengers looked up from their pre-flight routines to observe the exchange. He produced his boarding pass, extending it toward Heather. "I have a first-class ticket," he explained calmly. "Seat 3A." Heather's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched in obvious skepticism. She took the boarding pass, examining it as if searching for evidence of forgery. "This is unusual," she remarked, still speaking loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Did you perhaps get upgraded at the gate?" "No," Jamal replied evenly. "This is the ticket I was given." From seat 4C, Trevor Bennett snickered audibly, nudging his father who glanced up with a smirk. A ripple of uncomfortable murmurs spread through the cabin as more passengers turned to watch the unfolding scene. "Well," Heather continued, handing the boarding pass back with reluctance, "let me just verify this with my supervisor. Please wait here." She turned and spoke into her intercom device. "Carlos, I need verification at the forward cabin entrance." Jamal stood frozen in the entryway, acutely aware of the stares from other passengers. An elderly woman clutched her handbag tighter as she looked his way. A businessman in an expensive suit made a show of checking that his laptop bag was secure beside him. From his peripheral vision, Jamal noticed a woman seated in 2D watching the scene intently from behind dark sunglasses. Unlike the other passengers, she wasn't openly gawking or whispering. Instead, she observed with a stillness that somehow made her presence more noticeable despite her attempt to remain inconspicuous. After what felt like an eternity but was likely only 2 minutes, Carlos Rodriguez appeared from the rear of the aircraft. The flight supervisor was a middle-aged Latino man with a professional demeanor that contrasted with Heather's obvious disdain. "What seems to be the issue?" Carlos asked. "This young man claims to have a first-class ticket," Heather explained, emphasizing "young man" in a way that clearly communicated her doubts. I just wanted to verify it's legitimate. Carlos extended his hand for Jamal's boarding pass, which Jamal provided without comment. After examining it briefly, Carlos looked up at Jamal with considerably more respect than Heather had shown. Everything appears to be in order, Carlos confirmed. Mr. Washington, you're in seat 3A by the window. Are you sure? Heather pressed. It's just unusual the ticket is valid, Carlos interrupted firmly. Mr. Washington is a first-class passenger. Before Heather could respond, Trevor Bennett's voice cut through the tension. Maybe he found it in the trash, he suggested loudly, eliciting chuckles from his father and several nearby passengers. Jamal noticed at least 3 passengers had their phones out, subtly recording the interaction. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. No matter how they look at you or what they say, you belong in those spaces. He straightened his shoulders, determined to maintain his dignity. As Jamal began moving toward his assigned seat, Trevor deliberately extended his leg into the aisle. Caught between proceeding forward and making a scene by calling out the obvious attempt to trip him, Jamal tried to step over Trevor's outstretched foot. In doing so, he lost his balance slightly, bumping into businesswoman Victoria Adams in seat 3C. Watch where you're going. Victoria snapped, recoiling as if she'd been accosted rather than merely brushed against. Carlos, this is unacceptable. I paid for a premium experience, not to be manhandled by other passengers. I'm sorry, ma'am, Jamal apologized immediately. I didn't mean to, he should be removed from first class, Victoria continued as if Jamal hadn't spoken. He clearly doesn't understand proper behavior in this cabin. Several passengers murmured in agreement. The woman in seat 2D with the dark sunglasses remained silent, but Jamal noticed her fingers flying across her tablet screen with increasing intensity. Ma'am, Carlos began diplomatically, it was an accident. Mr. Washington has a valid first-class ticket and has every right to be here. Victoria huffed indignantly but said nothing further. Trevor and Russell Bennett exchanged satisfied smirks at having successfully escalated the situation. Jamal finally reached seat 3A, stowing his backpack in the overhead compartment and settling into the leather seat. The luxury that should have been exciting now felt tainted by the confrontation. He gazed out the window, trying to ignore the continued stares and whispers around him. Can I get you a pre-departure beverage? Brad Cooper asked other first-class passengers, conspicuously skipping Jamal. When Jamal raised his hand to request service, Brad pretended not to notice, continuing to serve other passengers with practiced charm and attentiveness. Excuse me, Jamal finally said. Could I have some water, please? Brad's smile tightened. We'll be serving all passengers once we reach cruising altitude, he replied curtly before moving on. Jamal noticed the woman in 2D observing this interaction, her expression unreadable behind her sunglasses. She continued typing on her tablet, occasionally pausing to make a phone call in hushed tones. As the final passengers boarded and the cabin crew prepared for departure, Jamal considered the humiliating prospect of enduring hours of this treatment. For a brief moment, he contemplated asking to be moved to economy class just to escape the hostile atmosphere. But then he thought of his grandmother, of all the sacrifices she had made to give him opportunities, of the hard work that had earned him his place at Stanford. Moving would mean letting the Bennetts and Heather win, confirming their assumption that he didn't belong. No, he decided. He would stay right where he was. He belonged in this seat as much as anyone else on the plane. The aircraft doors closed, and the captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming passengers to Flight 1342 to San Francisco. The plane began to push back from the gate, the engines rumbling to life as they taxied toward the runway. Jamal closed his eyes, trying to focus on the excitement of his first takeoff rather than the uncomfortable atmosphere surrounding him. Whatever happened during this flight, he would be starting his Stanford program tomorrow, a step toward the future he had worked so hard to create for himself. He had no idea that the woman in dark sunglasses was about to completely transform the trajectory of this flight, and perhaps his life. The aircraft continued its slow taxi toward the runway, the engine's steady hum vibrating through the cabin. Jamal kept his gaze fixed out the window, focusing on the ground crew directing the plane and the fascinating mechanics of the wing flaps. It was easier than acknowledging the sidelong glances and whispers that continued around him. In seat 4C, Trevor Bennett wasn't content to let the situation rest. "I didn't realize they were giving out charity tickets in first class now," he stage whispered to his father, loud enough for Jamal and several other passengers to hear. Russell Bennett chuckled, not bothering to correct his son's behavior. "The airline's diversity initiatives are getting out of hand," he responded at similar volume. Jamal tightened his jaw but remained silent, remembering Keith's advice about choosing his battles carefully. The mysterious woman in 2D continued working on her tablet, though Jamal noticed her typing had become more forceful, her finger strikes punctuating the cabin's ambient noise like tiny exclamation points. The plane paused on the taxiway, and Captain Gregory Peters's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been asked to hold position momentarily due to a technical matter that needs verification before takeoff. We should be on our way shortly. Flight attendants, please remain seated." A collective groan rose from the passengers. Heather and Brad exchanged confused glances, clearly not having anticipated this delay. Taking advantage of the pause, Trevor escalated his harassment. He pressed the flight attendant call button, and Heather promptly appeared at his side. "How can I help you, Mr. Bennett?" she asked with the warm smile she had never shown Jamal. "I'm concerned about the atmosphere in the cabin today," Trevor said, glancing pointedly at Jamal. "I was wondering if first-class passengers could request seating reassignments if they feel uncomfortable." Heather's eyes flicked to Jamal, then back to Trevor. "I understand your concern," she replied, her voice dripping with sympathy. "Unfortunately, we're fully booked today, but I'll see what I can do once we're airborne." "Appreciated," Trevor said with a smug smile. "It's just, you know, some of us paid for our seats." He emphasized the word paid while staring directly at Jamal. That was when it happened. Trevor, emboldened by Heather's tacit approval of his behavior, accidentally knocked over his complimentary champagne. The liquid arced perfectly through the air, splashing across Jamal's pants and Stanford t-shirt. "Oops," Trevor said with exaggerated innocence. "My bad." Jamal jumped up reflexively as the cold liquid soaked through his clothes. Brad hurried over with napkins but offered them to Trevor rather than to Jamal, the actual victim of the spill. "Sir, please remain seated during the taxi process," Brad admonished Jamal, ignoring the obvious provocation that had caused him to stand. That was the moment when the mysterious woman in 2D finally acted. She stood up, removing her dark sunglasses to reveal a face that, while unfamiliar to most passengers, sent immediate shock waves through the cabin. Russell Bennett's smug expression froze, then melted into one of horrified recognition. "That's enough," the woman said, her voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable authority that silenced the entire cabin. Simultaneously, the aircraft's engines powered down completely, the sudden absence of their background hum creating an eerie quiet. The woman stepped into the aisle, her designer business suit and commanding presence drawing all eyes. She was tall and elegant, with deep brown skin and piercing eyes that now focused directly on Jamal. "Hello, Jamal," she said softly. Jamal stared at her, confusion giving way to gradual recognition. The photographs and video calls hadn't fully captured her presence, but there was no mistaking those eyes, his own eyes, looking back at him. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What do you think about this situation so far? Have you ever experienced or witnessed racial discrimination while traveling?" Comment number 1 if you believe Jamal handled the situation with admirable restraint, or number 2 if you think he should have been more assertive from the beginning. If you're enjoying this story of justice about to be served, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this one. Now, how do you think Zara Washington will handle this situation? Will she use her power to teach everyone a lesson, or is there something more meaningful about to happen? Let's find out. The cabin fell into stunned silence as Zara Washington stood in the aisle, her presence commanding attention without effort. For Jamal, time seemed to slow as he processed the reality before him, his mother, in the flesh, after years of screens and distance. "I apologize for the deception," Zara said, addressing Jamal directly despite the audience of gawking passengers. "I wanted to surprise you, but my board meeting in Tokyo ran late. I've been watching everything from my seat." Jamal remained frozen, champagne still soaking his clothes, as conflicting emotions battled within him. Anger at her long absence warred with relief at her presence, while embarrassment at being the center of attention fought with vindication that someone was finally standing up for him. You were here the whole time," he finally managed. "Yes," Zara confirmed, her expression softening. "I caught a private flight from Tokyo that landed just before boarding began. I wanted to observe you, see the remarkable young man you've become before revealing myself." Her voice caught slightly. "It's been too long, Jamal." Recognition rippled through the cabin as passengers began connecting the dots. Phones emerged to search her name, and whispers intensified. "Oh my God, that's Zara Washington. The founder of Zara X Technologies. She's worth like $23 billion. One of the most powerful women in tech." Russell Bennett's face had drained of all color. As CEO of a mid-sized security software company, he undoubtedly recognized one of the most influential figures in the technology industry, a woman whose company had recently been considering acquiring his firm, according to business news Jamal had read online. Trevor's smug expression collapsed into confusion, then horror, as he realized who Jamal was, and what he had done. Zara turned her attention to Heather and Carlos, who had hurried forward at the commotion. "I'd like to speak with the captain immediately," she stated, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "And I want access to the security footage from this aircraft for the past 30 minutes. "Ma'am, I'm not sure that's possible during a flight," Carlos began cautiously. "It's entirely possible, Mr. Rodriguez," Zara replied, revealing she had noted his name earlier. "Particularly since this aircraft is not going anywhere at the moment." Carlos's eyes widened. "I don't understand." "Zara X Holdings owns 43% of this airline's parent company," she explained calmly. "I'm the majority shareholder. And I've just grounded this plane." A collective gasp swept through the cabin. Heather paled visibly, her practiced customer service smile completely abandoned. "Furthermore," Zara continued, "I've requested a full investigation into the treatment my son received today. The footage will be reviewed not just by airline management but by our legal team and the media, if necessary." Captain Gregory Peters appeared from the cockpit, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. "Ms. Washington? I was told you needed to speak with me urgently." "Captain Peters," Zara acknowledged. "Thank you for responding to my directive to halt our departure. I apologize for the inconvenience to your schedule, but we have a serious situation regarding discriminatory treatment of a first-class passenger, my son." The captain glanced at Jamal, taking in the champagne-soaked clothes and the tense atmosphere. "I see. What would you like me to do?" "I would like all passengers to deplane immediately," Zara stated. "This flight will not proceed until certain personnel issues are addressed and a comprehensive customer service training occurs." Captain Peters hesitated only briefly before nodding. "As you wish, Ms. Washington. I'll make the announcement." As the captain returned to the cockpit, Russell Bennett rose from his seat, straightening his tie and adopting his most charming business smile. "Ms. Washington," he began, extending his hand. "Russell Bennett, Bennett Technologies. What an unexpected pleasure. I believe our companies have been in discussions recently about a potential partnership." Zara regarded his outstretched hand with the same expression one might use when finding something unpleasant on the bottom of a shoe. "Mr. Bennett, I'm well aware of who you are. And you should know that as of 5 minutes ago, when I witnessed your son's behavior and your tacit encouragement of it, your company's proposal was permanently rejected." Russell's hand slowly dropped. There must be some misunderstanding. My son was just. Your son was engaging in blatant harassment based on racial prejudice, Zara interrupted, her voice like steel. And rather than correct his behavior, you participated in it. That tells me everything I need to know about your company's culture and values. Trevor shrunk in his seat, the reality of his actions' consequences beginning to dawn on him. The partnership his father had been pursuing for months, a deal potentially worth millions, was now dead because of his behavior. The captain's voice came over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, due to unforeseen circumstances, we need all passengers to deplane at this time. Please gather your personal belongings and exit the aircraft in an orderly fashion. Airline representatives will meet you in the terminal with further information about rebooking options." A chorus of groans and protests erupted from the passengers, but one sharp look from Zara silenced those in the first-class cabin. The woman who had been so determined to have Jamal removed, Victoria Adams, now couldn't meet his eyes as she gathered her belongings. As passengers reluctantly began to stand and collect their items, Zara turned back to Jamal, her public persona softening into something more vulnerable. "I know this isn't how either of us imagined our reunion," she said quietly. "And I know you have every right to be angry with me for being absent so long. But if you're willing, I'd like a chance to explain everything." Jamal looked at his mother, this powerful woman who had just halted an entire commercial flight out of concern for him. For years, he had imagined their reunion would be filled with recriminations, with all the hurt and anger he had stored up. Instead, he felt something unexpected, pride. Not just that his mother was someone important, but that she had used that importance to stand up against the kind of treatment he and his grandmother had faced their entire lives. "Yeah," he finally said. "I'd like that." As the first-class cabin emptied, with Trevor and Russell Bennett slinking past with averted gazes, Jamal noticed airline executives in suits rushing down the jetway toward the plane. The news of Zara Washington grounding an aircraft had clearly traveled fast. Zara placed a gentle hand on Jamal's shoulder. "Come on. There's a private lounge where we can talk while this situation is addressed." As they exited the aircraft, the contrast between how Jamal had boarded and how he was leaving couldn't have been more striking. Heather and Brad stood rigidly by the exit, their faces masks of professional neutrality tinged with fear. Carlos offered Jamal a subtle nod of apology. In the terminal, chaos had erupted as displaced passengers congregated around the gate desk, demanding explanations and alternative arrangements. Airline staff appeared overwhelmed until a distinguished man in an immaculate suit arrived, flanked by several assistants. "Ms. Washington," he called, hurrying toward them. "Frank Thompson, CEO. I just flew in from headquarters. I cannot express how deeply disturbed I am by what I'm hearing." "Then you haven't heard the half of it," Zara replied coolly. "But you will. I expect a full report on my desk by tomorrow morning, along with the termination paperwork for certain members of your staff." "Of course," Frank agreed quickly. "We're already reviewing the footage. This is not representative of our airline's values." "Isn't it?" Zara challenged. "Because from what I observed, it seemed very systematic." While the adults talked, Jamal felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention and drama. What should have been a simple flight to San Francisco had turned into a public spectacle. And while part of him appreciated his mother's intervention, another part felt uncomfortable with the spotlight and display of power. Needing a moment to process everything, Jamal quietly stepped away from the group, moving toward a quieter corner of the terminal. His mind raced with questions about his mother, about what all this meant for their relationship, and about how the day's events would affect his arrival at Stanford. One thing was certain, this was not how he had imagined his first flight would go. And as airline officials scrambled to address his mother's demands, Jamal wondered if the cost of this vindication, the public exposure, the upended travel plans of hundreds of passengers, was worth it. His grandmother had always taught him that dignity came not just from standing up for yourself, but from how you treated others in the process. As he watched his mother holding court with airline executives, Jamal realized that for better or worse, his low-profile journey to Stanford had just become considerably more complicated. The airport terminal transformed into a scene of controlled chaos as passengers from Flight 1342 congregated in confused, irritated clusters. Airline staff scrambled to set up impromptu rebooking stations, their faces tense with the pressure of managing an unprecedented situation. Security personnel discreetly positioned themselves throughout the area, responding to the unusual nature of the flight cancellation. In a secluded corner of the terminal, Jamal sat on a leather couch in the airline's premium lounge, which had been hastily cleared of other patrons. Through the glass walls, he could see the continuing commotion, feeling oddly disconnected from the disorder he had inadvertently helped create. Across from him, Zara ended a brief phone call, her third since they'd entered the lounge. "The board has been informed," she said, setting her phone down and focusing her full attention on Jamal for the first time. "They support my decision completely." Jamal nodded, still processing the whirlwind of events. "All those people," he said, gesturing toward the terminal. "Their plans are ruined because of what happened to me." Zara studied her son thoughtfully. "They're inconvenienced, not ruined. The airline is arranging alternative flights, hotel accommodations if necessary, and substantial compensation. More importantly, this is about something bigger than one flight." Before Jamal could respond, the lounge door opened, and Frank Thompson entered with two other executives in tow. The airline CEO's forehead glistened with nervous perspiration despite the terminal's air conditioning. "Ms. Washington, Mr. Washington," Frank acknowledged them both with deferential nods. "We've arranged alternative transportation for everyone. Premium customers are being rebooked on flights departing within the next 3 hours, while others will leave this evening or tomorrow morning." "And the crew?" Zara inquired pointedly. Frank cleared his throat. "Heather Brooks has been suspended pending investigation. Brad Cooper has received a formal warning. Carlos Rodriguez, who attempted to intervene appropriately, will continue his duties on another flight." "That's a start," Zara replied, her tone making it clear she expected more comprehensive action. "And the security footage?" "Being compiled as we speak. Our legal team will have it within the hour." Frank hesitated before continuing. "Ms. Washington, while we deeply regret the treatment your son received, I must express concern about the scale of the response. Grounding an entire aircraft is unprecedented." Zara's expression hardened. "So is having my son publicly humiliated and discriminated against while your staff either participated or stood by. Which do you think will cost your airline more in the long run, Frank? The expenses of rebooking passengers, or the class action discrimination lawsuit and public relations disaster that would follow if I release the footage of today's events to the media?" Frank paled visibly. "Of course. We're taking this extremely seriously." As the executives retreated from the lounge, Jamal turned to his mother. "Was all this really necessary?" Zara's professional facade softened. "You tell me, Jamal. Was this the first time you've experienced this kind of treatment?" Jamal thought back to countless, random, security checks, store clerks following him through aisles, teachers expressing surprise at his academic achievements, police officers approaching him and Keith for simply existing in certain neighborhoods. Each incident had been manageable in isolation, each one something his grandmother had taught him to handle with dignity. But their cumulative weight had shaped his life in ways he rarely articulated. "No," he admitted quietly. "It happens all the time. But usually, I just deal with it." "That's what they count on," Zara replied, leaning forward. "They count on people like us, just dealing with it, because making a scene is too costly, too exhausting, too risky. But sometimes, Jamal, someone needs to say, enough." Through the glass walls, Jamal noticed Russell and Trevor Bennett being escorted to a rebooking desk by an airline representative. Trevor's earlier arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a sullen, defeated posture. Russell's phone was pressed to his ear, his gestures growing increasingly agitated as he presumably dealt with the fallout from Zara's rejection of his company's partnership proposal. Your actions affected more than just Heather and Brad, Jamal observed. Mr. Bennett's company. Bennett Technologies has been pursuing a security integration partnership with Zara X for months, Zara confirmed. Their proposal was under serious consideration until today. Now it's not. Because of how they treated me. Because character matters in business, Jamal. How people behave when they think no one important is watching tells you everything about how they'll conduct themselves as partners. Russell Bennett revealed his true character today, and so did his son. The lounge door opened again, admitting a distinguished older man in a pilot's uniform, Captain Peters. He approached with a respectful demeanor. Ms. Washington, Mr. Washington, he greeted them. I wanted to personally apologize for what occurred on my aircraft. As captain, the safety and dignity of all passengers is ultimately my responsibility. Thank you, Captain, Zara acknowledged. I appreciate your professionalism in handling an unusual situation. A new crew has been assigned to fly Mr. Washington to San Francisco as soon as he's ready, Captain Peters continued. A private aircraft can be arranged if preferred. Before Zara could answer, Jamal interjected, what about the other passengers? Will they be okay? The captain seemed surprised by Jamal's concern but answered readily. Yes, sir. Everyone is being accommodated. Many have already been rebooked. After Captain Peters departed, Zara regarded her son with obvious pride. That's what I missed, she said softly. Watching you grow into someone who cares about others even when they didn't care about you. Jamal shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. Grandma taught me that. She did an amazing job, Zara acknowledged, a note of something like regret coloring her voice. A commotion outside the lounge drew their attention. The terminal's relative calm was disrupted as airline executives scurried toward the main entrance, where news crews were setting up cameras. Word of the incident had apparently reached the media. That was fast, Jamal remarked, anxiety building at the thought of becoming a news story. Information travels quickly when a billionaire grounds a commercial aircraft, Zara replied dryly. But don't worry. Our PR team is managing the narrative. And what narrative is that? Jamal asked, suddenly wary. The truth. That this airline has a discrimination problem that was exposed today, and that Zara X Holdings expects immediate corrective action. Just then, the lounge door opened again, and a striking woman in a sharp suit entered purposefully. Ms. Washington, we're ready for your statement whenever you are, she announced. Zara nodded, then turned to Jamal. Jamal, this is Patricia Alvarez, our Chief Communications Officer. Patricia, this is my son, Jamal. A pleasure to meet you, Jamal, Patricia said warmly. Your mother speaks of you often. This surprised Jamal, the idea that his mother discussed him with her colleagues when she had been so absent from his actual life. Zara stood, straightening her suit jacket. I need to address this publicly, Jamal. Would you like to join me? The question caught Jamal off guard. The thought of cameras, microphones, and public scrutiny made his stomach clench. Yet part of him recognized the opportunity to speak to an experience that millions of young black men faced daily. I don't think so, he decided finally. This is already bigger than I wanted it to be. Zara nodded, respecting his choice. I understand. Wait here. We have a lot to talk about when I'm done. As his mother left with Patricia, Jamal watched through the glass as they approached the media gathering. Within moments, Zara transformed into the poised, articulate business leader whose TED Talks and interviews Jamal had watched countless times online, always searching for glimpses of the mother behind the public persona. On the terminal monitors, her impromptu press conference appeared, the Chiron identifying her as Zara Washington, CEO of Zara X Technologies and majority shareholder of Meridian Airlines. With measured words, she described a disturbing pattern of discriminatory behavior witnessed on today's flight, announced a comprehensive review of airline policies, and the establishment of a new anti-discrimination training program for all staff. What she didn't mention was Jamal specifically, protecting his privacy while addressing the broader issue, something he appreciated deeply. As Jamal watched his mother command the attention of the media with such effortless authority, he felt a complicated mix of emotions: pride in her accomplishments, lingering resentment over her absence, and a new understanding of why she might have chosen the path she did. His phone buzzed with a text from his grandmother: "You're all over the news. Are you okay? Call me." Before he could respond, another message appeared, this one from Keith: "Dude. Your mom is Zara Washington. Why didn't you tell me? Also, you're trending on Twitter." With growing alarm, Jamal opened Twitter to find the hashtag #FirstClassWhileblack already gaining momentum, with people sharing their own stories of discrimination during travel. Someone had captured video of the initial confrontation with Heather, though thankfully the footage didn't clearly show Jamal's face. As social media exploded with commentary about the incident, Jamal felt increasingly overwhelmed. What had started as personal humiliation was rapidly becoming a national conversation about race, privilege, and corporate responsibility. While he recognized the importance of that conversation, he hadn't planned on becoming its catalyst. Needing space to process everything, Jamal slipped out of the lounge while his mother was still engaged with the media. Finding a quiet corner of the terminal far from the commotion, he sat alone, watching travelers hurry past, each absorbed in their own journeys, unaware that the young man observing them had just inadvertently sparked what would likely become a viral movement. For the first time since boarding the plane, Jamal had a moment to reflect on the day's extraordinary events. In less than 3 hours, he had experienced public humiliation, witnessed his long-absent mother's dramatic intervention, and now found himself at the center of a rapidly developing news story about racial discrimination. All he had wanted was to fly to Stanford and begin his summer program. Now, he wondered how this incident would affect his experience there. Would he arrive preceded by his viral moment rather than his academic achievements? Would this define him before he even had a chance to define himself? As these thoughts swirled through his mind, Jamal's phone buzzed again, another text from his grandmother: "Remember who you are. Not what happened to you, not who your mother is. You. I'm so proud of you." Somehow, across hundreds of miles, Doris Washington had known exactly what her grandson needed to hear. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the airport terminal, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Jamal had found refuge in a quiet corner near an unused gate, away from the media circus still surrounding his mother's impromptu press conference. His phone continued to buzz with notifications, which he had eventually silenced after responding to his grandmother and Keith. "There you are." Jamal looked up to find Zara approaching, having somehow slipped away from the reporters. She had removed her suit jacket, appearing slightly less formidable without it, more like the mother from his childhood memories. "Sorry," he said. "I needed some space." "I understand." Zara settled beside him on the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. "This is a lot to process, especially on what was supposed to be an exciting day for you." Silence stretched between them, 10 years of absence condensed into a heavy pause. "Why did you leave?" Jamal finally asked, the question he had carried since age 7 tumbling out before he could reconsider. Zara didn't flinch from the directness of his query. The simple answer: "To build something that would ensure you never had to face the limitations I did." The complicated answer: "Because I was terrified of failing you by staying." She turned slightly to face him. "When your father abandoned us before you were born, I was 22 with nothing but a computer science degree and a mountain of student debt. My first 3 job interviews, I was the only black woman in the building. In 2 of them, the interviewer suggested I'd be more comfortable in customer service than engineering." Jamal listened, trying to reconcile this vulnerable narrative with the commanding woman who had grounded an airplane hours earlier. "I started a small consulting business from your grandmother's spare bedroom," Zara continued. By the time you were 5, it had grown enough that venture capitalists were interested. But they made it clear, I needed to be in Silicon Valley, working around the clock, projecting a certain image to be taken seriously. So you chose the business over me, Jamal stated flatly. Zara winced. I thought I was choosing both our futures. I believed creating generational wealth and influence was the best way to protect you in a world that. She gestured toward the terminal where the incident had occurred. A world that treats young black men the way you were treated today. I didn't need wealth or influence, Jamal replied, his voice quiet but firm. I needed my mother. You're right, Zara acknowledged, her composure cracking slightly. Your grandmother told me the same thing countless times. But I convinced myself that building Zara X wasn't just ambition, it was a form of love, creating a legacy that would open doors for you that had been closed to me. Before Jamal could respond, Frank Thompson approached, his expression grave. Ms. Washington, we've completed our preliminary review of the incident, he reported. Heather Brooks has been terminated, effective immediately. We're also implementing your suggested changes to our training protocols. And the young man who deliberately spilled his drink on my son? Zara inquired. Frank shifted uncomfortably. As he's not an employee, there's little formal action we can take, though he and his father have been placed on our no-upgrade list permanently. That's not enough, Zara stated flatly. It's enough, Jamal interrupted. Both Frank and Zara looked at him with surprise. What happened to me today happens to people who don't have billionaire parents every day. Fixing the system is more important than punishing Trevor Bennett. Frank nodded respectfully at Jamal. We're announcing a comprehensive anti-discrimination initiative that will include passenger conduct guidelines. If you're amenable, we'd like to consult with you both on its development. After Frank departed, Zara regarded her son with newfound appreciation. That was gracious of you. Grandma always says holding grudges is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Jamal shrugged. Besides, Trevor's probably facing worse at home. His dad lost a major business opportunity because of him. As if summoned by mention, Russell Bennett appeared at the edge of their secluded area, alone and visibly humbled. He approached cautiously, stopping at a respectful distance. Ms. Washington, Mr. Washington, he began, his earlier arrogance entirely evaporated. I wanted to apologize personally for my son's behavior and my own failure to intervene. There's no excuse for what happened. Zara's expression remained impassive. Where is your son, Mr. Bennett? Shouldn't he be delivering this apology himself? Russell winced. Trevor is currently writing a formal letter of apology. I wanted to speak with you first, to take responsibility as his father. He hesitated. The partnership our companies were discussing would have transformed Bennett Technologies. Losing that opportunity is entirely my fault, and the consequences will affect hundreds of employees who had nothing to do with today's incident. Your employees aren't being punished for your son's actions, Zara clarified. They're experiencing the natural consequence of having leadership that tolerates discriminatory behavior. Companies reflect their leadership, Mr. Bennett. Russell nodded grimly. A lesson I've learned too late. He turned to Jamal. Young man, I am deeply sorry for what happened today. It was unacceptable, and I failed as both a bystander and a parent. The apology seemed genuine, but Jamal noted that even now, Russell couldn't quite bring himself to address him by name. Thank you for apologizing, Jamal replied simply, neither absolving nor condemning the man. After Russell departed, Zara and Jamal remained in thoughtful silence until Patricia approached with news that the media situation had been contained and a private aircraft was ready to take them to San Francisco whenever they wished. We've also received 17 interview requests for both of you, Patricia added. Including major networks and print publications. Jamal tensed at this information. Zara, noticing his discomfort, made an immediate decision. Decline them all, she instructed. This isn't about publicity. It's about accountability. Patricia nodded and retreated, leaving mother and son alone again. You turned down national media coverage? Jamal asked, surprised. Isn't that valuable for your company? Some things are more important than business opportunities, Zara replied, her eyes meeting his. I've missed too much of your life chasing success, Jamal. I don't want to miss any more by turning a painful experience into a corporate PR opportunity. For the first time that day, Jamal felt a genuine connection with his mother, not as Zara Washington, tech billionaire, but as the woman who had once sung him to sleep and taught him to tie his shoes. I have an apartment near Stanford, Zara said tentatively. I bought it last year when you were accepted to the summer program, hoping we might spend some time together. But only if you want to. Jamal considered this revelation, that his mother had planned for his arrival long before today's dramatic reunion. I'm still angry, he admitted. 10 years is a long time to be an afterthought. You were never an afterthought, Zara countered gently. You were the whole point. I just lost sight of that along the way. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion nearby. A young black woman in economy class was having a heated discussion with a different gate agent, her frustration evident even from a distance. The agent's dismissive body language mirrored what Jamal had experienced earlier. Without hesitation, Jamal stood and walked toward the situation, Zara following curiously. As they approached, they overheard the dispute. I'm sorry, miss, but without proper documentation, we cannot allow you to board, the agent was saying with thinly veiled impatience. I've shown you my student ID and my acceptance letter, the young woman insisted. My wallet was stolen yesterday, and the police report is right here. Stanford expects me tomorrow for the same summer program. Excuse me, Jamal interrupted, addressing both the agent and the young woman. Did you say you're attending Stanford's summer technology program? The woman turned, relief crossing her features at finding a sympathetic ear. Yes. My name is Alicia Johnson. I'm supposed to be there for orientation tomorrow, but my ID was stolen, and now they won't let me board. Jamal extended his hand. I'm Jamal Washington. I'm in the same program. Recognition dawned on the gate agent's face as he connected Jamal to the incident that had the entire airport buzzing. His demeanor transformed instantly. Mr. Washington. I apologize for any inconvenience. Let me see what we can do to assist Ms. Johnson. As the agent hurried to make accommodations, Alicia looked at Jamal with confusion. What just happened? Why does he suddenly know who you are? It's a long story, Jamal replied with a small smile. But I think you'll be able to make it to Stanford now. Standing slightly behind them, Zara observed the interaction with a mixture of pride and revelation. In this moment, watching her son naturally extend help to a stranger facing the same systemic barriers he had encountered, she understood something profound. While she had been building a financial legacy to protect Jamal, he had developed a moral compass and sense of justice that transcended wealth or status. Perhaps, she realized, her son had never needed saving in the way she had assumed. Perhaps, in the most important ways, Doris had raised him to be stronger than Zara had ever been. 2 hours after the dramatic grounding of Flight 1342, a new aircraft sat at Gate B-17, prepared for departure to San Francisco. The replacement plane gleamed under the airport lights, a fresh crew standing attentively at the boarding area. The passenger manifest had been adjusted, with several notable changes from the original flight. Jamal and Zara approached the gate together, having spent the intervening time in continued conversation, not resolving 10 years of absence, but beginning the long process of understanding. Behind them walked Alicia Johnson, whose documentation issues had been swiftly resolved following Zara's intervention. I still can't believe this, Alicia whispered to Jamal as they neared the gate. Is your mom really Zara Washington? The Zara Washington? Apparently, Jamal replied with a small smile, still processing this reality himself. Though I'm just getting to know her again. At the boarding desk stood Carlos Rodriguez, who had requested to remain on the new flight despite being offered the day off with pay. When he spotted Jamal, he stepped forward. "Mr. Washington," Carlos began earnestly, "I wanted to apologize personally for not intervening more decisively earlier. I should have done more." Jamal appreciated the sincerity in the man's eyes. "You were the only crew member who treated me with respect. Thank you for that. This time will be different," Carlos promised, gesturing to the new crew. "I'll personally ensure it." The boarding process began smoothly, with first-class passengers invited to board first. As Jamal, Zara, and Alicia, whose ticket had been upgraded to first class, approached the aircraft door, they were greeted by Alicia Jefferson, the new senior flight attendant. "Welcome aboard," Alicia said warmly, making direct eye contact with each of them. "We're delighted to have you with us today." The first-class cabin had been reconfigured slightly, with Jamal and Zara assigned to the front row seats, and Alicia directly behind them. As they settled in, Jamal noticed several familiar faces from the previous flight, including Victoria Adams, who studiously avoided eye contact. Most notably, in the last row of first class sat Russell and Trevor Bennett, whose expression suggested they would have preferred any other seating arrangement. Trevor looked particularly uncomfortable, clutching a sealed envelope that presumably contained his written apology. "Shouldn't they be in economy now?" Jamal whispered to his mother. "They were originally reassigned there," Zara confirmed quietly. "But I had them moved back." "Why?" Jamal asked, surprised. "Because segregating them solves nothing," Zara explained. "They need to sit here, uncomfortable though it may be, and experience being treated with the same professional courtesy as everyone else, no more, no less. That's equality." As the boarding continued, Alicia approached with pre-departure beverages for everyone, including a sparkling water for Jamal without him having to request it. The contrast with Brad's earlier service was striking. "Ms. Washington," Alicia said discreetly, "Captain Monroe would like to speak with you briefly before takeoff, if you're available." Zara nodded and followed Alicia to the cockpit, leaving Jamal momentarily alone. In her absence, Trevor Bennett hesitantly approached, clutching his envelope like a shield. "Jamal," he began awkwardly, using his name for the first time. "I wrote this apology, but I think I should say it to your face too." He took a deep breath. "What I did was inexcusable. I was showing off, trying to impress my father and the other passengers at your expense. It was racist, cruel, and I'm truly sorry." Jamal studied Trevor's face, searching for the sincerity behind the words. The arrogant smirk from earlier had vanished, replaced by genuine remorse. "Why?" Jamal asked simply. "You don't know me. What made you think it was okay to treat another person that way?" Trevor's face flushed with shame. "Honestly, I've never had to think about it before. I've always been the most important person in any room. At least, that's what I was taught." He glanced back at his father, who was watching the interaction tensely. "Today was the first time I've ever faced consequences for how I treat people." "That's a privilege in itself," Jamal observed without malice. "Some of us face consequences for other people's assumptions before we even open our mouths." Trevor nodded slowly, the concept clearly new to him. "I get that now. Or at least, I'm starting to." He extended the envelope. "Anyway, I wrote everything down. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry about the Stanford program too." "What about it?" Jamal asked, taking the envelope. "You're in the advanced coding track, right? That's where I was assigned to. It's going to be awkward, seeing each other every day after this." Jamal hadn't considered this possibility, that Trevor would be in the same program, potentially the same classes. The summer he had been looking forward to suddenly seemed complicated in new ways. As Trevor returned to his seat, Zara reappeared from the cockpit. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing the envelope in Jamal's hands. Trevor apologized, Jamal explained. Apparently, we're in the same program at Stanford. I see, Zara replied thoughtfully. That will be interesting. As the boarding completed and the cabin doors secured, Captain Monroe's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard and specifically thanking passengers for their patience during the earlier disruption. The new crew moved through the cabin with professional efficiency, their service attentive without being obsequious. Once they reached cruising altitude, Zara took the opportunity to share more about her business journey with Jamal. She described the early years of sleeping in her office, facing countless rejections from investors who couldn't envision a black woman leading a major tech company, and the strategic decisions that had ultimately led to ZaraX becoming a global powerhouse. I started with a simple security algorithm I developed in college, she explained. Now we protect 80% of global financial transactions. Every time someone swipes a credit card anywhere in the world, our technology likely safeguards that information. That's impressive, Jamal acknowledged sincerely. But what about the personal cost? Zara's expression softened. That's the question I've been asking myself more frequently lately. Building ZaraX consumed me so completely that I justified every sacrifice, including time with you, as necessary for success. It wasn't until about 2 years ago that I realized success felt hollow without sharing it with you. What happened 2 years ago? Jamal asked. I had a health scare, nothing serious in the end, but it forced me to consider my legacy beyond business achievements. I realized I'd created financial security for you but sacrificed our relationship in the process. That's when I started making changes, scaling back my direct involvement in day-to-day operations and planning for this summer. Their conversation was interrupted as Victoria Adams approached tentatively from her seat. Excuse me, she began, addressing both of them. I wanted to apologize for my behavior earlier. It was inexcusable. Zara regarded her coolly. Your apology would be more appropriately directed to my son, Ms. Adams. Victoria turned to Jamal. You're right. I'm truly sorry, Mr. Washington. When you accidentally bumped into me, I reacted based on assumptions and biases I didn't even realize I held. There's no excuse for how I treated you. Jamal acknowledged her apology with a nod but offered no absolution. Victoria retreated to her seat, clearly uncomfortable with the interaction's unresolved nature. You didn't make it easy for her, Zara observed. Should I have? Jamal countered. Her apology was about making herself feel better, not about understanding the harm she caused. Zara smiled slightly. You're wiser than I was at your age. As the flight progressed, Jamal noticed a subtle but significant shift in how passengers interacted with him. Where before there had been suspicion and disdain, now there was excessive friendliness, with several people finding transparent excuses to introduce themselves to Zara Washington's son. They're only being nice because they know who you are now, Jamal observed quietly after a particularly obvious interaction. Yes, Zara agreed. That's how privilege works. Yesterday, they wouldn't have given you a second thought. Today, they're falling over themselves to connect with you. It feels fake, Jamal admitted. It is fake, Zara confirmed. But it also demonstrates an uncomfortable truth: respect shouldn't depend on who people think you are or who your mother is. During a trip to the restroom, Jamal passed through the economy section and noticed a young black man about his age being treated dismissively by one of the flight attendants. The passenger had requested a vegetarian meal that had apparently been misplaced. I'm sorry, sir, but if it's not in our system, there's nothing I can do, the attendant was saying with thinly veiled impatience. Jamal paused, recognizing the familiar pattern. Without his mother's presence or the now-known connection to Zara Washington, this passenger was experiencing the same treatment Jamal had faced earlier. Returning to his seat, Jamal made a decision. He explained what he had observed to Zara, who immediately summoned Carlos. There's a passenger in economy, seat 34C, who needs assistance with a meal request, Jamal explained to Carlos. Could you personally ensure he's taken care of? Of course, Mr. Washington, Carlos replied, immediately heading toward economy. Later, as the flight began its descent into San Francisco, Jamal reflected on the day's extraordinary events. What had begun as simple excitement about his first flight and anxiety about the Stanford program had transformed into a complex reckoning with privilege, racism, and family reconciliation. Looking at his mother, who was reviewing emails on her tablet, Jamal made another important decision about their relationship moving forward, one that would shape not only his summer at Stanford but potentially the rest of his life. The aircraft descended through wispy clouds, revealing the stunning panorama of the San Francisco Bay Area below. Golden Gate Bridge stretched majestically across the water, while the iconic skyline emerged through the afternoon haze. For Jamal, who had never ventured west of Chicago, the view was breathtaking, a visual representation of the new world he was about to enter. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Zara commented, noticing her son's awe. "It's like something from a movie," Jamal replied, his face pressed against the window. As the plane banked toward San Francisco International Airport, Zara's phone buzzed with a message. She frowned slightly as she read it. "Is something wrong?" Jamal asked. "Not wrong, exactly," Zara replied, choosing her words carefully. "But there are reporters waiting at the terminal. Word of today's events has spread faster than anticipated." Jamal's stomach tightened. "Reporters? For me?" "For us," Zara clarified. "Our PR team has arranged for private transportation to bypass the main terminal, but..." She hesitated. "This is your story too, Jamal. If you want to speak about what happened today, that's your right." The aircraft touched down smoothly, taxiing toward the gate as passengers prepared for deplaning. Captain Monroe's voice came over the intercom, thanking everyone for flying with them and extending special appreciation to Jamal and Zara Washington for their patience during unusual circumstances. As the seatbelt sign dinged off, Alicia approached their row. "Ms. Washington, Mr. Washington, we've arranged for you to deplane first. There will be representatives waiting to escort you through a private exit." Jamal gathered his backpack, mind racing as he considered his mother's words. This was his story too. For years, he had lived in the shadow of his mother's absence, managing discrimination and microaggressions with the quiet dignity his grandmother had taught him. Today's incident wasn't unique. What made it extraordinary was that, for once, there had been consequences for the perpetrators. How many other young men like him faced similar treatment daily with no recourse? How many Heather Brookses and Trevor Bennetts never faced accountability for their actions? "I want to make a statement," Jamal decided suddenly. Zara looked surprised but nodded respectfully. "Are you sure? Once you step into the public eye this way, it's difficult to step back." "I'm sure," Jamal confirmed. "Not for me, but for everyone who doesn't have a billionaire parent to ground planes on their behalf." As they deplaned, Carlos discreetly handed Jamal a business card. "My personal contact information," he explained. "If you ever need anything while traveling, please don't hesitate to call. What happened today has opened my eyes too." Jamal pocketed the card with a nod of thanks. As they walked through the jetway, he could see airline representatives waiting anxiously at the gate. Beyond them, through the terminal windows, camera flashes and a cluster of reporters were visible. Patricia Alvarez met them at the gate entrance. "We've prepared a statement if you'd like to use it," she offered, extending a tablet toward Zara. "Thank you, but I believe Jamal has something of his own to say," Zara replied, surprising her PR chief. Patricia turned to Jamal with professional interest. "We can arrange security to keep the reporters at a comfortable distance, and you can decline any questions you're not comfortable answering." Jamal appreciated the consideration but shook his head. "I want to speak directly to them. No filters, no corporate messaging." As they approached the media gathering, Jamal felt a surge of nervousness but reminded himself of his grandmother's words, "Remember who you are." With that thought anchoring him, he stepped forward to the impromptu press area. Camera flashes intensified as reporters recognized Zara, their questions overlapping in a chaotic jumble until Jamal raised his hand, surprising them into a momentary silence. "My name is Jamal Washington," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Today, on what should have been a routine flight to begin a summer program at Stanford University, I experienced something that's unfortunately all too familiar to many Black Americans." The reporters grew quiet, sensing the authentic story unfolding before them rather than the prepared corporate statement they had expected. "I was questioned, mocked, and humiliated for simply occupying space in first class, space I had every right to occupy. What makes my story unusual isn't that it happened. It's that for once, there were consequences." Jamal glanced at his mother, drawing strength from her supportive presence before continuing. "Every day across this country, people who look like me are made to feel they don't belong in certain spaces, restaurants, stores, neighborhoods, boardrooms, and yes, first-class cabins. Most of us don't have the power to ground planes or change corporate policies when we're discriminated against. We're expected to stay quiet, to not make waves, to just deal with it." A reporter called out, "Are you calling for a boycott of the airline?" Jamal shook his head. "No. What happened today wasn't just about one airline or a few individuals. It's about a systemic problem that requires systemic solutions. I'm calling for something more difficult, for everyone to examine the assumptions they make about people based on appearance, and for companies to create real accountability for discriminatory behavior." Zara stepped forward to stand beside her son. To that end, she announced, Zara X Foundation is establishing the Equal Access Initiative, a program dedicated to addressing discrimination in transportation and public accommodations. The foundation will provide legal support to individuals who experience discriminatory treatment and will work with companies to implement meaningful anti-bias training and accountability measures. The announcement generated a flurry of questions from the press, but Jamal noticed the young man from economy class, the one who had been denied his vegetarian meal, standing uncertainly at the edge of the crowd. Excusing himself from the reporters, Jamal approached him. "Hey," Jamal greeted him. "I'm Jamal Washington." "Marcus King," the young man replied, extending his hand. "I just wanted to thank you for sending that flight attendant to help me." Not many people would notice or care about something like that. "Are you headed to Stanford too?" Jamal asked, noting the university logo on Marcus's laptop bag. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, for the summer technology program, but the computer science track. I couldn't afford the advanced coding track." Jamal glanced back at his mother, an idea forming. "Would you be interested in the advanced track if it were possible? I mean, if funding weren't an issue?" "Of course," Marcus replied, confusion evident on his face. "But the application deadline passed months ago, and the scholarships are all allocated." "Let me introduce you to someone," Jamal said, guiding Marcus toward Zara, who had just concluded her media statement. "Mom, this is Marcus King. He's in the Stanford summer program too, but couldn't access the advanced coding track due to financial constraints. I was wondering if the foundation might have a scholarship opportunity available." Zara assessed Marcus thoughtfully. "The foundation certainly could. But I'd like to hear about your interest in coding first, Marcus." As Marcus explained his passion for programming and his projects developing apps to help low-income families locate resources, Jamal noticed Trevor Bennett watching their interaction from a distance. Making a decision that surprised even himself, Jamal approached him. "Trevor," he acknowledged with a nod. Trevor seemed startled by the direct address. "Jamal. I read your apology letter on the plane." He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "It seemed sincere." "It was," Trevor confirmed. "I've been thinking about what you said, about facing consequences for other people's assumptions. I've never had to deal with that. Maybe this summer is your chance to learn," Jamal suggested. "We're going to be in the same program. I'm not saying we'll be friends, but we can at least be civil." Trevor nodded, relief evident in his expression. "I'd like that. And I promise, I'm going to do better. It's not about promises, Jamal replied. It's about actions. Show me who you're trying to become, not who you were on that plane. Returning to where Zara and Marcus were still talking, Jamal found his mother already making arrangements for Marcus to join the advanced coding track through a newly created foundation scholarship. It's settled, Zara announced as Jamal approached. Marcus will be joining you in the advanced track, and will be establishing 5 additional scholarships for underrepresented students in next year's program. Marcus looked stunned by this sudden change in his circumstances. I don't know how to thank you both. Succeed, Jamal suggested simply. That's all the thanks anyone needs. As the media event concluded and they prepared to leave the airport, Zara pulled Jamal aside for a private moment. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about needing your mother rather than wealth or influence, she said quietly. You were right. I made choices that prioritized building something for you over being present with you. I can't change the past, but I can change the future, if you'll let me. What are you suggesting? Jamal asked cautiously. I mentioned I have an apartment near Stanford, Zara reminded him. What I didn't mention is that I've also opened a new research campus for ZaraX in Palo Alto. I'm relocating here permanently, not just for the summer. Jamal's eyes widened in surprise. You're moving to California. Because of me? Because it's time to be your mother again, not just your benefactor, Zara clarified. I've missed 10 years, Jamal. I don't want to miss any more. If you're willing, I'd like us to have dinner once a week during your program. No pressure, no grand gestures, just getting to know each other again. The simple request, so human, so normal compared to the day's dramatic events, touched Jamal deeply. This wasn't Zara Washington, tech billionaire, making a power move. This was his mom, asking to have dinner with her son. I'd like that, he agreed softly. As they exited the terminal, Jamal's phone buzzed with another text from his grandmother. He opened it to find a news headline. Airline announces new anti-discrimination policy following incident. Below the headline was a picture of Jamal speaking to the reporters, looking confident and composed. The accompanying message from Doris read, "See what standing your ground can accomplish. So proud of you, baby. Call me when you're settled." Jamal smiled, showing the message to Zara. Grandma always knows what to say. She raised an extraordinary young man, Zara acknowledged. I have a lot to thank her for. As they climbed into the waiting car that would take them to Stanford, Jamal looked out at the California landscape, so different from the Chicago streets he knew. Today had been a day of confrontation, revelation, and new beginnings. What had started as a humiliating experience had transformed into something powerful, not just for him personally, but potentially for countless others who faced similar discrimination without recourse. Tomorrow, he would begin his summer program at Stanford, armed with new knowledge about himself, his mother, and the power of standing firm in the face of injustice. And perhaps most importantly, he had taken the first steps toward rebuilding a relationship that had been fractured for too long. As the car pulled away from the airport, Jamal reflected on how quickly life could change. This morning, he had been a teenager from Chicago's South Side, flying alone for the first time. Now, he was at the center of a national conversation about race and privilege, with a reunited mother and a platform to effect real change. His grandmother had always told him that life's most difficult moments often preceded its greatest opportunities. Today had certainly proven her right. What would you do if you were in Jamal's position? Would you have handled the discrimination differently, or do you think his approach, dignified but firm, was the right one? If you've experienced or witnessed similar situations, share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found Jamal's story inspiring, subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories of overcoming adversity, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful response to injustice is simply refusing to accept it as normal. This powerful story reminds us that discrimination often thrives in spaces where accountability is absent. When Jamal boarded that plane, he entered a microcosm of society where assumptions based on appearance determined how he was treated. What transformed this everyday incident of racism into something extraordinary wasn't just Zara's intervention, but her ability to create immediate consequences for discriminatory behavior. The story teaches us that standing firm in spaces where others question your belonging is an act of courage. Jamal's initial dignity in the face of humiliation, followed by his thoughtful decision to speak publicly rather than retreat into privilege, demonstrates true leadership. He recognized that his unusual position of power created an opportunity to advocate for those without similar protection. We also learn that privilege operates invisibly until disrupted. The passengers who mocked Jamal or silently condoned his mistreatment only recognized their behavior as problematic when confronted with Zara's status. True change requires acknowledging these unconscious biases rather than defending or dismissing them. Perhaps most importantly, the story reveals how systems protect those who discriminate until forced to change. Meaningful transformation demands more than apologies or diversity statements. It requires structural accountability and consequences that previously didn't exist. When organizations create real costs for discriminatory behavior, what once seemed unchangeable can shift remarkably quickly. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination like what Jamal experienced? Would you speak up or stay silent? Share your thoughts in the comments below about how you might handle a similar situation if you saw it happening to someone else. Have you ever been in a position where you had to stand up against unfair treatment based on race or appearance? Your stories could help others find courage in difficult moments. If this story moved you or made you think differently about everyday discrimination, please hit that like button to help more people discover it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that illuminate social injustices and the courageous people confronting them. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, perhaps a friend who's experienced similar treatment or someone who might benefit from examining their own assumptions, share this video with them today. Thank you for watching and being part of a community that believes in dignity and respect for everyone, regardless of appearance or background. Remember, sometimes the most important change begins with a single person refusing to accept injustice as normal.